Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's episode of the Jayden Bryce Show, the show where we talk about the hottest topics around the world of sports. I'm happy to be with you all live today on this Friday afternoon, April the 3rd. Got a lot to talk about when it pertains to the NFL and the NCAA March Madness. Not the games in the upcoming couple of days, this coming up weekend, but the games of last weekend as my favorite team got upset. Now I'm talking about the Duke Blue Devils getting upset by UConn. Got a lot of things going on with the NFL. Got a very interesting article, which you see in the thumbnail and the headliner for today's show. A very interesting article released by ESPN and Jeremy Fowler regarding Jalen Hurts. We want to get a deep dive into that. That's going to be the first thing we want to talk about. Things that happen in the league meetings when it pertains to the referees in the new CBA, no Monday Night Football double headers, and the 18-game regular season, which is a very interesting point that many people have brought into discussions over the last couple of years. And we got some things going on with Devontae Adams getting traded for A.J. Brown for the Rams. Sean McVay went on Up and Adams and talked about that. And we're going to talk about some George Pickens. So action-packed show. Can't wait to get to it. Got some very, very troubling headlines this week, period, with Tiger Woods and the DUI, Puka Nacua going to rehab and stuff like that. Kirk Cousins getting signed by the Las Vegas Raiders. A lot to talk about, and we'll save that for another day. Thank you all for joining, and if you enjoy my podcast and my YouTube channel, make sure you guys like, subscribe, share my podcast to a friend or a family member. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's show. The headliner, as I foreshadowed roughly 30 seconds ago, is the interesting article regarding Jalen Hurts. We've seen multiple of these articles over the last couple of years. It seems like every offseason, the year that Jalen Hurts went on to win the Super Bowl, there's always some sort of article coming out of Philadelphia, Philly media, just media in general, questioning the integrity of the football player and the leader, Jalen Hurts. Now, as we see on the lower third that I have here, it was reported in the article that Jalen Hurts at times has poor body language, isn't always bought in, and he is not coachable. And there are some other things and some other stuff that was going on in this article regarding the offensive struggles of the Philadelphia Eagles the last couple of years, how it's been revolving around Jalen Hurts' inability to want to adapt and be open-minded to new changes that the offensive coordinators have. And it dated back way back with Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator, who was the offensive coordinator for them winning the Super Bowl. So it put into question for me, is Jalen Hurts a problem? But let me say this. I don't think this report surprises me. And I know I've said that we've seen this report many times, but this one in particular for me is not surprising, because you can see it in Jalen Hurts' personality. I pointed this out multiple times. When he goes up to the podium, people may think that Jalen Hurts is putting on this Michael, and they talked about it in this article by Jeremy Fowler, this Michael Jordan-esque type mentality, this Kobe Bryant type mentality. But the difference between Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant were that these were two players in their specific league who were ultra talented. I mean, my Lord, Kobe went on an NBA court and scored 81 points. Michael Jordan has been regarded as one of the most skillful players to ever grace the basketball court. When we look at Jalen Hurts, that is not the type of characteristics we bestow upon him as a player. We don't think he is a skillful football player. We don't think he has a big arm. We don't think he is hyper athletic and fast like Lamar Jackson when he's carrying the football. The only thing we can really say about Jalen Hurts from an athletic standpoint that we find very interesting and specific to him, to where he stands out above others, is the idea that he's able. We've seen a video of him squatting 600 pounds. We've never watched an NFL game with Hurts and say, wow, he's one of one when it comes to throwing the football. Wow, he's one of one when it comes to running the football. He is one of one when it comes to dissecting offenses. But the one thing we cannot argue in no way, form, or fashion is that Jalen Hurts is a winner. And I think this is where this player in Jalen Hurts, he is a very controversial topic. He has been since he's been in the league. He's been controversial way back in Alabama when he was benched for Tua Tagovailoa. And then when he goes to Oklahoma and becomes a Heisman candidate. And then when he ultimately gets drafted by the Eagles, first couple years it was rough. And then he ultimately leads a team to a Super Bowl. And then 2 years after that, he goes and wins one and wins the Super Bowl MVP. I didn't want to use this analogy, but I'm going to go ahead and bring it up. A lot of people around the media space, nationally, want to compare Jalen Hurts to Russell Wilson. Not a super talented player. Russell Wilson, we can say he had one great trait, and that was his deep ball. Jalen Hurts, similarly to Russell Wilson, has a great deep ball. But ever since that first Super Bowl, their personality changed. We've seen that with Jalen Hurts just last year. He shows no emotion. It's the same thing over and over every time. He says the right thing, but he has no personality. You can see from his demeanor, just in his media interviews at the podium, that this is a type of guy I can see behind the scenes being tough to work with. One thing in the NFL that we can really harp on when it comes to the quarterback position, you have to be a leader. You have to be innovative. And being innovative is something that is very intangible at the quarterback position, as well as every other position in the NFL, from ownership, getting innovative. What does Roger Goodell do every year? They find ways to change the league and make the league better. What do coaches do every single offseason when they are going towards the journey of winning a Super Bowl? How do we change things? How do we get innovative? How do we get better? And this is something that Jalen Hurts isn't doing. And it could be a problem for the Philadelphia Eagles for the foreseeable future. Why has there been multiple coordinators for the Philadelphia Eagles? Jalen Hurts has had, from 2021 to 2022, he had Shane Steichen. In 2023, he had the quarterback coach at the time. Don't remember. Brian Johnson, I think, was his name from the top of my head. Then after Brian Johnson, 2024, you have Kellen Moore. Last year, you have Kevin Patullo. And this year, you're going to have Sean Mannion. This kid has had 5 or 6 different offensive coordinators the last 5 or 6 years. A lot of people have blamed this on the Philadelphia Eagles and their, some of these coaches, rightfully so, and this is their argument in Philly. A lot of these coaches were going to head coaching jobs. You lost Kellen Moore because of a head coaching job, and you lost Shane Steichen because of a head coaching job. But one can argue, could this be possibly because of Jalen Hurts? And the likelihood of coaching him not being a super desirable outcome? I could see that as a possibility. So with this story coming out by Jeremy Fowler, and this is coming by league execs, these are people within the league, and these are sources coming out with this story. This upcoming season will be interesting for Philly. New offensive coordinator, the offensive struggles. And there's a little points in here as well where a lot of people are blaming the offensive struggles on Jalen Hurts because it stemmed from the A.J. Brown stuff. And the reason why A.J. Brown has become frustrated with the offense and the lackluster that it is and the inability to go up under center. The picture is painting itself. Jalen Hurts may be the root of these problems. Jalen Hurts might be the reason why that A.J. Brown leaves. And we got to give credit to Jalen Hurts, and this is where I'm going to give credit to Jalen Hurts, and this is where I want to defend him. We cannot take away the fact that he's played in 2 Super Bowls, and he has played phenomenal. We cannot take that away from him. In the 2 Super Bowls that he has played, he has been absolutely phenomenal. And if he would have won the other one against the Chiefs the first time, there was a great argument that he would have won Super Bowl MVP in that game as well. He was that locked in. But to those who argue that this player could lead to the potential downfall of the franchise, I'm open to that conversation. Because Jalen Hurts' cap hit, he's not cheap anymore. That cap hit is very significant. You're going to lose players. Philly has lost players this offseason. The Cooper DeJeans and the Quinyon Mitchells and all these players hitting on these draft picks, the A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley's, they're not going to be there for the foreseeable future. Jalen Hurts is going to have to ride this train. In comparison to his current contract in the current quarterback landscape, Jalen Hurts is relatively cheap. A lot of questions going on in Philly. Do I think Jalen Hurts is a problem? I would say, and I would dare to believe that I believe Jalen Hurts is more than likely 70% of the problem in Philly. And the reason why they had their offensive struggles just this past season. And it would not surprise me this upcoming season if we're going to see on display more of that trouble. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I've talked about this before. Jalen Hurts is a great player. But the idea that he's this Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen type quarterback to where you can revolve an offense around him, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think you have to revolve the offense around the run game in Philadelphia in order for them to be successful. I don't think you could turn Jalen Hurts into this quarterback where you give him the ball and you go pass the ball down the field and win you the game. I just don't think it's going to happen. And who knows if what my claim regarding Jalen Hurts could come into fruition in the foreseeable future. March Madness has been phenomenal. There's no way to doubt that claim. The games have been great. There was a stat that came out just last week about the Elite, or just beginning of this week about the Elite Eight. They garnered like 65 million views or something around that nature, if I remember correctly. It might have been 30-some. For some reason, those two numbers are on the top of my head. But the March Madness has been great. We've talked there has been talk around the media how the freshman class that has came in has been one of the best freshman classes that we've seen in the past 2 or 3 decades. And the atmosphere that March Madness has created as far as the sport of basketball in comparison to the NBA, and I've argued this many a times, it has been absolutely phenomenal. I'm not going to talk about it in totality, but I am going to talk about the game that I did not get to watch the second half of, but I went back and watched, and it was brutal because I had to work that night. Yes, the Duke Blue Devils went on to lose to the number 2 seeded UConn Huskies, led by Dan Hurley and the whole crew. Very disappointing loss, and I have to say, having a 19-point lead, and ending up losing that ball game has to be a very, very disgusting and sickening feat for not only John Shire, but the players in the locker room, from the Cameron Boozers, the Caden Boozers, who gave up the big turnover to lose the game. Guys like Caleb Foster and Malik Brown. Just a very, very heartbreaking loss all around in so many facets and so many ways. I'm not going to react to the game. I'm going to leave that up to y'all. I'm not going to sit here and give you the stat line and everything else under the sun. We're just going to have an honest conversation when it pertains to Duke and their inability to win a championship. Because it's a very, very interesting and tough conversation we got to have. Duke gave up a 19-point lead, and their last 4 losses have been blown double-digit leads. Dating back to last year, the first one being against Houston, where they had a 15-point lead at one point in the Final Four with Cooper Flagg and the crew and the whole bit. Just this year, with Texas Tech at home, then against Carolina on the road, and then Sunday against UConn. They choked another double-digit lead. And this is one where it is tough to swallow because we've said all year about Duke, and I've argued this, and many people around the media has talked about it. It felt as if Duke was always a second-half team. Even dating back to the very first game of March Madness this year when they played Siena. They were down double digits at one point and came back in the second half. Same thing with TCU. And it was the quite opposite. It just seems like for the last couple, just even this year and some parts of last year, when Duke loses, they lose in dramatic fashion. They're not getting smoked by 17, 18 points. Every single loss that they have, they are up big at one point in the first half. And even in this game against UConn, the last minute and a half of the game, you're up 19, minute 33 on the clock. And for some reason in the second half, they just come out super flat. You can blame that as a coaching issue. You can blame it on the players getting too complacent at times. I think it's a mixture of the both. I think it's more of a player issue when players get complacent in the first half. You're in a 19-point lead. You're playing the UConn Huskies. They've won 2 out of the last 3 national championships, number 2 seed. And if you even get to the very next game, you got a pretty good draw. You don't have to play Arizona or Michigan. So there was a good possibility that players like Malik Brown and all these other players were feeling themselves. And this is something that we can say because Malik Brown and Karen Boozer, when they were losing to Siena and ended up winning the game, they came back at, post-game, were like, man, you know what? We were just complacent. We took this game for granted. We played with our food. We played down to our competition. So do we really blame John Shire for the epic collapse these last 4 games that they've had and they've lost? Absolutely not. I don't think we can. But this is back-to-back seasons in March Madness of horrendous losses. And I've had multiple conversations over these last couple of days with multiple friends and family members. I'm from North Carolina. We bleed this blue blood rivalry between North Carolina and Duke. And there's been multiple discussions, and everyone's wanting my 2 cents on it. Which loss was worse? Last year's loss or this year's loss? Now, I can't really say. I would probably feel different if I was able to watch this game from start to finish. As I said, when I turned the game off and I had to officiate a basketball game for work, I saw that we were up big, and I felt like the lead was comfortable. And in no way, form, or fashion did I feel like UConn was even capable of coming back in this game. They couldn't shoot the backside of a barn from the 3-point line. But somehow in the second half, it got to that point, and I didn't. And at the time, I didn't get to react in real time with the Caden Boozer turnover and the big shot and all that. So maybe my mind is different, but I just remember last year, the team that we had, and I've said this to multiple people this year. To me, I never felt like, as a Duke fan, I thought this team was going to win it all. I even had made a March Madness bracket. In my bracket, I had Michigan winning it all. I had Duke playing Michigan in the national championship, but I just did not feel like this team was capable of winning the national championship. I just didn't, with the 2 injuries and even Caleb Foster, 3 weeks off of surgery and coming out there and playing, and it just didn't feel like the year for Duke. It just didn't. But last year with Cooper Flagg and Kneppel, that team there to me felt like it should have won a national championship. And that's why last year's loss and the way in which they lost, man, that game to me was the one that made me feel like, and even the team that just made me feel like, man, yeah, that was the worst of loss. That's just me personally. I don't think that this loss in the Elite Eight was worse to me. That is just me. And the fact that last year the Duke lost and all the implications around it with me thinking they had a better team, that's just my argument. But let's get to the Caden Boozer play. I know a lot of people have had their 2 cents on this, and I'm going to go ahead and give my own bit. I thought Caden Boozer made the right play. You're up 2. There's 6 seconds left. You're at midcourt. Patrick Gumba, and if I remember correctly, there was somebody at the opposite three-point line too, wide open. If he makes that pass, the ball game is over. We're not having a discussion about Duke getting upset in the Elite Eight. We're having a conversation this week about Duke possibly winning it all. But it was an unfortunate play. It was a lucky play in the part of UConn. And this kid, I don't even know the kid's name. I've done and forgot it. I've heard it all week, but I've done and forgot it now, and I'm not about to look it up. But he made a phenomenal play, and he grabbed the ball and shot a half-court shot, a three-point shot, mind you, to beat you. And you were up 2. There's no other way. That's just March Madness. That is just an unfortunate loss, in my opinion. Super unfortunate. Now, would I feel different if I watched this game start to finish and was able to witness that 19-point lead get diminished? Maybe. But I'm just speaking from my point of view at this present time. And even if I did get to witness this game start to finish, I would probably still feel the same about Caden Boozer. He made the right play. If I was in his shoes, I played basketball for 12 plus years. If I was in his shoes, I would have made that play. I know the argument has been, you get fouled, cool. But one thing that we've seen about Caden Boozer since Caleb Foster's been gone, you do not trust him dribbling the basketball. So at the time, just unfortunate bounce. And instead of going to the Final Four this weekend, Duke is finding themselves at home. And it's tough. Cameron Boozer was in tears. Caden was in tears. And props to those two guys, the Boozer twins. They really took this loss very well in the media. They owned up to it. It sucks. I know Caden Boozer has a good chance to be back, but Cameron is definitely going to the NBA. So it is another star that is leaving Duke without a national championship. And this leads into something that I thought about, and I've seen multiple media outlets post it. Duke's gone 10 plus years without winning a championship with elite talent. I may argue that Duke has had one of the most talented teams over the last, probably the most talented teams the last 10 years in comparison to any other program across college basketball. I don't say that lightly, but I think Duke has really missed a huge opportunity for the program and their gratification and chokehold on the game of college basketball. They've had the Zion Williamsons, the Mark Ingrams, the Cooper Flaggs, the Conca Nipples, Malawak, Mark Williams, Cam Reddish, RJ Barrett. The list goes on and on. There was like 20 players. Jason Tatum. All of these players, they were great. And you haven't won a national championship with all of that elite talent. And very interestingly, I saw John Calipari, can't go on ESPN today, and talk about how the landscape of college basketball has changed. And the idea of getting all these freshmen and looking for your team to be successful in the tournament is highly unlikely. And this is something that I have argued about for Duke over the last couple of years, specifically during COVID when you can have these 25, 26-year-olds with, COVID years. I think it might be in the best interest of Duke to possibly change their philosophy. I think it might be good for them to be able to retain players and get older and just keeping a couple of good freshmen. I think Duke actually has a good opportunity this upcoming season to do that because the only starter I think they're going to lose is Cameron Boozer. Now, Malik Brown's a senior. He's pretty much done. But the Isaiah Evans and the Caleb Fosters and the Dame Sarr and all these guys, I think they have a great possibility to stay because they are not going to be NBA talent. And even Caden. So, yeah, it's very disappointing to know that Duke's had all this talent and have not been able to win a championship. But ultimately, Jon Scheyer is going to win a national championship at some point in his career. There's no doubt about it. He was the first coach to get to 127 at an elite program. He's a phenomenal coach. He's a phenomenal motivator. He can recruit. He just checks all your boxes. He's done a phenomenal job having to take over the reins from arguably the greatest coach in the history of college basketball in Mike Krzyzewski. That was a tough ask. You see what's happened to Hubert Davis. He's got axed. And a lot of that has to do with the success of Jon Scheyer. So in no way, form, or fashion should we be having questions regarding Jon Scheyer if he is the guy, this and that. Jon Scheyer is the guy. He is going to win a national championship. He just went up against the lights of that man you see on your screen right now, Dan Hurley, who is a great coach. When he is all said and done, going to be considered one of the greatest coaches in the history of college basketball. That is who Jon Scheyer and the Duke Blue Devils lost to. And to me, that is a very, very, very respectful loss. But we got a couple great games the next upcoming days. Michigan, Arizona, Illinois, and UConn. Going to be a great weekend of college basketball leading to the conclusion of the 2025-2026 season. But now we go back to the NFL. So we know that I think what we're going to talk about first. Oh, yeah, the interesting article regarding out of the league meetings about Davante Adams and A.J. Brown. We're going to get to that, and then we're going to talk about the league meetings itself, and we're going to end things off with George Pickens. So, Sean McVay went on Up and Adams, Kay Adams, shout out Kay Adams, love her show. He went on Kay Adams' show, Up and Adams, and pretty much confirmed that they had trade talks regarding Davante Adams and A.J. Brown. And he made it vocal that the Rams, Les Snead, and everyone involved in the organization did let and has talked with this about Davante Adams getting traded for A.J. Brown. So they've notified, I didn't say that right. They have notified Davante Adams that they have had trade talks regarding him and A.J. Brown, which I think is a very good thing for them to do. Now, ultimately, what do I think about this? Now, when we got to remember one thing. This was originally reported by The Athletic and Diana Rossini. They do a phenomenal job. Shout out to them and shout out to her. Diana Rossini is a great, great reporter in the NFL landscape. She reported that the Rams were one of the teams pushing heavily for Davante Adams. And I remember when I saw the report, I've never really reacted to it on camera, but I said to myself, why? Didn't make sense. And so now that we know that it's true out of the mouth of Sean McVay, I'm going to go ahead and give my 2 cents on that. Because I wouldn't do it. I would not do it. Give credit to Diana Rossini. I figured that report initially could have been true because there was 3 teams. It was the Rams. Might have been the Titans, maybe. Was it the Titans? But I know it was the Patriots. The Rams and the Patriots were the 2 teams for sure. And I think there was a 3rd team that they said was reported, but I think they ended up being anonymous, and we don't know who they are. So, but thinking about it from the grand scheme of things, I would not do this trade. Just me personally. The only argument that I could see it for is nutrition. Davante Adams is roughly 34 years old, fixing to be 35, and A.J. Brown is 28, fixing to be 29 this upcoming season. So there's a 6-year age gap between the 2 players. But I really pretty much compared their stats. This guy, Davante Adams, had 14 touchdowns. He led the league in touchdowns this year at the wide receiver position. Granted, he wasn't healthy every single game. But for the Rams, you already have Puka Nacua, which now I see why these trade talks might be making sense, because this is the reason why this brings up another conversation regarding this trade and another spectrum and idea that we can think about regarding the news that we got about Puka Nacua this week, about him being in rehab. So we are wondering if the Rams are not wanting to commit to Puka Nacua, because there was a report that came out roughly a week before Jackson Smith-Njigba signed his contract extension. There was a report, don't know who reported it, but there was a report that the Rams are not head over heels about signing Puka Nacua to an extension. And it was because of the stuff that's came out this week and the stuff that's occurred over the last couple of years with, Puka Nacua getting with these Twitch streamers and saying these things and having to apologize for his remarks publicly. Puka Nacua has had a lot of growing up to do in regards to that point. So there's a lot of question marks revolving that. So if you're looking for the Rams, if you don't want to commit to a guy like Puka Nacua, you can trade for a guy like A.J. Brown, get younger, and possibly pick up one of these young receivers in the draft. So in that sense, this is more than likely why the Rams are pretty much trying to make this decision. Now, in no way, form, or fashion am I questioning the Rams. I think that ownership, that GM, that franchise is a top 5 franchise currently in the NFL right now. They are ran very well from top to bottom. They have established this mentality of bump them picks. They've done it since back when they traded for Jalen Ramsey. It worked out. They got a Super Bowl for it. They traded Jared Goff away and got rid of him like for nothing and got a future Hall of Famer in Matthew Stafford. And they've been able to say bump them picks and draft great talent. They've got Jared Verse. They got Byron Young. They got Fisk, the defensive tackle, in the middle. And so they were able to do that. And now they're in the second era, and 8 years later, of F them picks. I think Jalen Ramsey was trading like 2018, 2019. So they're in another era of bump them picks. And they're able to trade for a guy like Trent McDuffie for all that draft capital, sign Jalen Watson, and then potentially make a trade for A.J. Brown because of how young they are. And they know this is a win-now mode. Matthew Stafford, he is good to play 2 more years. So the Rams are a very smart organization. A.J. Brown obviously has more upside. He's younger. He is pretty much mostly available. He's never had no big injuries. So has Devontae Adams. He's never had any big injuries. But hamstring issues are starting to become a huge problem for Devontae Adams. And that's the reason why he was out this year. And the reason why he just wasn't 100% going down the stretch. So I could see the Rams wanting to get more upside, wanting to get younger. Because they want to get younger because you have a Matthew Stafford. He's only getting older. He's 30. Think what? Matthew Stafford's 36 years old. He's on the latter part of his career. As I stated a while ago, he's good to play another 2 or 3 years. So I could see the Rams wanting to get younger. That's why you get a Trent McDuffie. You sign a Jalen Watson into his second contract. You're wanting to get off of these guys like the Devontae Adams. And that's the reason why a lot of people are loving the idea of the Rams drafting Ty Simpson in the upcoming draft this year. So that's the reason why I could see this making a lot of sense for the Rams. But the reason why I would just halt on the idea is because of the personalities. If I have to have an A.J. Brown and a Puka Nacua in the same locker room, I as a coach might be banging my head against the wall. And I will look at Les Snead and be like, dude, what are you putting me in for here? And Sean McVay is a great coach. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a top 3 coach in the league. He is more than capable of handling a personality like A.J. Brown if he's able to handle someone in the likes of Puka Nacua, who is an all-pro wide receiver, 6th-round draft pick, and he's going to more than likely sign a hefty $40 million contract just like Jackson Smith-Njigba. So I think Sean McVay is a more than worthy candidate to be able to deal with a guy like A.J. Brown. But man, just investing in A.J. Brown for multiple years, he's relatively cheap right now, and he's only going to get cheaper. There's no way when he signs his 3rd contract, he is going to get Jackson Smith-Njigba type money. That is not happening. You could roughly get A.J. Brown on a 2nd contract for roughly under $30 million, I think. So, yeah. Would I be stoked to see this trade for the Rams? Absolutely. Because I want to see A.J. Brown go from the Eagles, just from a Cowboys standpoint, Cowboys fan standpoint. But interesting nugget from Diana Rossini. Got to give a lot of credit to her. She has been on this ever since back in free agency started, pretty much. And that was a good month and a half ago. Got to give credit to her and the athletic and the phenomenal work that they do. They just continue to set the standard around the league when it comes to reporting. Now that this was news part of the league meetings, we're going to go ahead and get to the league meetings themselves, and we're going to discuss some big news coming out of the league meetings over the last couple of days up in Arizona. So, league meetings, annual league meetings regarding head coaches, owners, and everyone was conducted early this week on Monday and Tuesday. I think they might have been there for an extra couple of days as well. But down there in Arizona at the Biltmore, and a lot of stories and conversation coming on in regards to the 18-game season, the referee CBA, and the Monday Night Football doubleheader. And there was also another report about Friday games no longer being considered short week games, if I remember correctly. I can't remember if it was that or backwards. I might have got that wrong, but we're not going to talk about that part of it. We're going to talk about the big three: the 18-game season, the referee CBA, and the Monday Night Football doubleheader. We're going to go ahead and start with the Monday Night Football doubleheader. Now, wrong button. I can say right now, when I saw Ari Mariov, shout out to him, when I saw him come up with this report about them getting rid of the Monday Night Football doubleheader, I was ecstatic. Okay. I've argued this over the last couple of years. I thought the Monday Night Football doubleheader was one of the dumbest things that the NFL has done in years. Why are we having a football game on an exclusive primetime window on Monday night? Why do we have multiple games going on at the same time? And there was some instances, it wasn't a lot of the time. Every once in a while, over the last couple of years, you'll have a primetime doubleheader. Like these were good games. From an analysis standpoint, you're a guy like me who don't have two TVs and you hate YouTube TVs. Even though I got to give YouTube TV credit, it's a great option for those who want to do that. You got the multi-view. I get it, but I despise it. I like the screen to be big, full screen. I do that when I watch all my YouTube videos. I want to see everything in full screen. I don't want no half screen and two screens on the side. That's just me personally. So I did not like the idea, if you're a person like me who doesn't have two TVs in your household, and you're wanting to watch these games, you can't watch them just because you just can't, because you're playing back to back. So I hate this idea. So you have one game to start at 7:15, 7:30, and then the next game will be at 8:15. And then that takes away from being able to enjoy the likes of the Troy Aikmans and that crew. So I always hated the idea of the Monday Night Football doubleheader. I despised it. It took away from what makes primetime games great. During the week, on Sunday, when you don't have an opportunity to watch some of the teams that you want to watch, they get these primetime games. And if you're thinking about this from an analytical standpoint for a guy like me who, doesn't have multiple TVs and you can't really watch all the teams that you want to watch every Sunday, the Monday Night Football and the primetime games on Monday and Thursday gives us as an opportunity as fans and just people in the media, gives us the opportunity to watch these teams and just critique them and talk about them. I think it's just good publicity for the teams in general. So having a double header and you're having to worry about a whole nother game or having to watch another one, it was just a headache for me. And it took away the idea of a primetime game, having a primetime window. There's a reason why there's the term that comes on with the jingle. I've been waiting all day for Sunday night. That is the reason why. Us fans, we look forward to primetime football. One game on, one game only. Everyone around the world gets to watch. That's the reason why Sunday Night Football is so great. Monday Night Football and Thursday Night Football. Not a huge fan of Thursday Night Football. I think Al Michaels needs to let it go. That's just me personally. But good job, Kurt. Kurt Herstreet does a good job. So that's a slight diss in that. But that's my 2 cents on that. Phenomenal job by got to give credit to Roger Goodell and everyone in the NFL involved with that decision. Getting rid of that, got to give credit to where credit is due. Referee CBA. This is a very interesting one. Pretty much there is the CBA deal for the NFL referees roughly goes, expires in May 31st, if I remember correctly, after reading the article yesterday. And there's a big discrepancy right now between the officials and the league itself, Roger Goodell and others. The big focal point right now is the NFL wants the referees to be better at their job. Rightfully so. There's been multiple games in the NFL this year, specifically over the last couple weeks of the season, where there was a lot of controversial plays. And I say that as a referee who does this for work right now currently. I can say there were a couple of plays where you just sat and scratched your head like, I don't know about that call there. But so that's the reason why there's a big discrepancy on that right now. And if I remember correctly from reading the article, the referees want upgrade in pay, and ultimately they want to feel respected. They feel like they're not gaining the respect that they deserve from the current deal that the league is trying to bestow upon the referees in their CBA. And there's this big thing with the NFL to where I think they're like baseball. They're trying to transition into this digital aspect of refereeing, pretty much trying to take the referees' hands out of the football game to where they want to incorporate New York and a lot more calls or down the stretch games. And I 100% am going to side with the referees on this. I have been totally against the idea of letting technology take over the game. It takes away from the human element of officiating. And right now, they cannot get to a deal. And the NFL is already prepared to have replacement referees from Division I, Division II, and Division III. They didn't specify the high school level. They left that out. They just said in college from D3 all the way up to D1. But roughly 2 days ago, the NFL Players Association is pretty much backing the referees, saying the referees are essential to us as players to keep us healthy, and the NFL referees value up at the utmost peak level player safety, and they embody that. So the NFL Players Association wants the NFL and the referees to get a collective bargaining agreement done. Ultimately, pay the officials. They're more valuable than you think. They are more valuable than you think. I know as us fans, we can't see this through the TV. But the relationships that players have with these officials, they respect them. And ultimately, you got to respect them. They were established in the game of football for a reason. And like I said and I talked about earlier, we know that at some point, the digital revolution is going to have its hand in the referee umpiring world. I have said for the last 2 years, I think baseball at one point is going to get rid of their umpires and call balls and strikes from a robot. I see that becoming a thing. And we've seen so far in the NFL with the digital first downs and everything else that they might try to come up with in the future. There is a future where I believe there might be a way that the NFL referees are not going to have their hands on football games like they would want to have. And the referees union is trying to fight against that idea, and rightfully so. So pay the officials what they want. A 10% increase in their salary is what I think the NFL is offering. They want more than that, because a lot of referees, they do not make money year round like the NFL. I think the NFL players don't get paid. I don't know how it works. I just know they're not year round employees. They call their games during that 6-month span the league is playing, and after that they do not work. And a lot of officials, they have second jobs. So paying what they're worth, the league makes a buttload of money. They make a crap ton of money. All these players, When we got quarterbacks making $60 million, wide receivers making $40 million, you can't pay the referees $500. I think the average pay that article said was $250,000. Come on, $250,000. Come on, man. Respect. Give them double that. Jesus, Roger Goodell, quit being cheap. But the officials, and rightfully so, if we're going to critique them, I know I'm on the official side, but give them one critique. Just get the calls right. There's more, like I said earlier, there's multiple plays where you just sit there and like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Why was that call made? Like, give me an explanation. And I understand a lot of coaches, fans, and I'm sure Roger Goodell has said to himself, like, dude, the officiating has got to get better just a little bit. Officials were not perfect. But ultimately, we got to get the calls right. And that's what Roger Goodell, and I'm sure everyone across the league wants. And let's just get together. Roger Goodell needs to get together with the referees union, and the NFLPA needs to get involved, I think, as well, and get a deal done so player safety can be the number one priority leading into next season. We do not need Division III to Division I officials on the field where we can have a moment like we had 10, 12 years ago. I think it was back in 2013. With the Seahawks and the Packers game where we had one official saying there was an interception and the other one saying there's a touchdown. Like, we don't need it. We just do not need that at all. But the big point and the main focal point in the league owners meetings is the 18-game regular season. Big talking point right now among the owners. And I got to talk about this because I've found it very interesting because, I love football. So the more football, the better for me. I'm a fan. But I saw Robert Kraft's proposal for the 18-game season. He proposed the idea, 18-game season. So that means we get 2 bye weeks. And we're going to decrease the preseason to 1 game. And I think from what they're saying is that the first game and weekend of the year is President's Day weekend, so that means people are going to have work off that Monday, or if I get that right, is it President's Day? Either way, I know basically for the Super Bowl, people are going to get that Monday off work because there's some holiday if they stretch out the season to 18 games. So I loved Robert Kraft's proposal. I think it was absolutely phenomenal, and I would be up for it. But the one thing that we could worry about is that player safety should be the main priority. Football is very taxing on the body. ACLs and all these season-ending injuries were occurring in 16-game seasons. Then we moved to 17. Then we're possibly going to move to 18. And when I talked about Jalen Hurts and the league getting innovative earlier, the league, and Roger Goodell, to their credit, gets pretty innovative. And I got to give them a whole lot of credit. It's the reason why I think it's the best league in the world. They continue to find ways to entertain their fans. Whether it's changing the onside kick, getting kick returns back into the game. They do a phenomenal job at making sure, in some way, form, or fashion, they get entertainment done at the highest level. But player safety is going to be a main concern. That is going to be a lot of pushback for the reason why they don't go to this. Owners are going to vote on it. And I know Jerry Jones even made the comment about this. More games means more money. I push back against that a little bit. But this is the reason why I would be worried about it. I'm in between on it. I would love an 18-game season just for you to get a second bye week. I think that's going to be very, very beneficial. I could argue they need 2 bye weeks already anyways. That's just my opinion. But could this lead to potential load management? I saw this, and I didn't come up with this myself. The article that I read about this came up and proposed this idea, and I got to give them credit for coming up with that. We know that load management is a huge issue right now in the NBA. Players sit out games just for rest, and to be able to rest their players accordingly to be able to compete for championships and be ready for the playoffs. Could we see that in the NFL with the stretch of an 18-game season? Possibly. If you stretch the games out enough, you could find yourself like like the NFC South, for example, horrible division. But let's just take, for example, that the Panthers at the time were 5 or 6 games up in the division by week 14. Week 15 through 19, because there's going to be a 19th week, people's going to be missing games. Players might be resting. They might be resting Bryce Young that day just for rest. It poses the possibility to it getting that way. I hope not. I hope, and I think that Roger Goodell will be a more proactive. I'm over here forgetting what Roger Goodell is. Why am I having a brain fart right now? Wow. But Roger Goodell, commissioner, Jesus. Roger Goodell would be a better commissioner about getting a load management issue resolved rather than Adam Silver. This is not a shot at Adam Silver. I just think he has gone about the whole load management thing, the absolute wrong way. I think there is no way he could have handled it more worse. So that's just my 2 cents on that. But 18-game season, I'm up for it. But I just want to make sure the research is done that player safety is going to be not a huge primary issue with that. So that's just my 2 cents on that. Very last topic. George Pickens. Obviously, we're going to talk about some Cowboys, of course. George Pickens was a main conversation and talking point in the league meetings. Brian Schottenheimer and Jerry Jones had their 2 cents to say about him. Brian Schottenheimer said something about George Pickens on Up and Adams. And Jerry Jones said something about George Pickens to local media at a just basic interviews. And both Brian Schottenheimer and Jerry Jones pretty much said that George Pickens more than likely will not be available for off-season OTAs because of the franchise tag and him wanting to seek getting his contract extension. We're going to have this conversation all off season until training camp and things of that nature. A lot of people in the media, local Cowboys media, has talked about this not being an issue because George Pickens was not there for OTAs when, because he just wasn't there because he was traded. Blah, 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 blah. But we got to just think about it from this standpoint. Cowboys drama never ends. Just never does. There was contract drama with Dak twice, contract drama with Ezekiel Elliott. I want to say Amari Cooper had contract drama at one point, if I remember correctly. CeeDee Lamb. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And even Micah Parsons just this last year. So there's never going to be an offseason where the Cowboys are not going to have drama. The Cowboys, when it just comes to free agency and trades, period, just does not get anything done right to the utmost satisfaction of everyone across the league. And I say that because before I was writing this show, as of a couple hours ago, there was an interesting article by The Athletic. That company just keeps to come up with the saucy articles. There are anonymous executives around the league that has said the Cowboys has had an underwhelming offseason so far regarding their signings that they've made, their trades, and the way they've handled George Pickens. So there you go with that. But Schottenheimer and Jerry Jones confirm that George Pickens is in the long-term plans with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, this is where I got to give the Cowboys credit. The Dallas Cowboys has placed an efficient franchise tag on George Pickens. It's the non-exclusive one, if I remember correctly. So it is the one to where if a team is able to talk to George Pickens and make him an offer, the Cowboys have the ability to match that offer. But if the Cowboys don't match that offer, that team not only has to pay George Pickens, but give up some sort of compensation for that player. A lot of, Todd Archer had in his article that it has to be two first-round picks. I've seen a lot of people say that is not the case. You kind of have to agree to a certain compensation. I definitely do not think for George Pickens it is not coming close to 2 first-round picks, because there's no team going to pay George Pickens $35+ million on top of getting rid of high-quality draft capital like 2 first-round picks. I could probably see 1 first-round pick and maybe like a late rounder, like a day 3 pick or a late day 2 pick. I don't know. But there's no way on God's green earth that George Pickens is getting a $35 million contract alongside 2 first-round picks. It's not happening. No franchise and no GM is dumb enough to do that sort of deal. Maybe someone like the Arizona Cardinals or one of these terrible franchises, maybe. I don't know. But good Lord, there's just no way an NFL team should and will do that. And ultimately, I would not sign George Pickens to a long-term deal. I've said this before, and I will say it again. This is a player that has a lot of baggage. Yes, is he fantastic on a football field? There's no doubt about it. But from the Cowboys' point of view, you're just very uncomfortable having invested roughly what? Close to $60 to $70 million just in 2 players at the same position, when you can allocate that money elsewhere. That's not a comfortable thing in conversation to have. How's that turning out for the Bengals? Not turning out so hot. You can say Philly's been able to do it. Both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are not going to account for $60 million. They're not. I think Smitty got close to around the $20 million range, and A.J. Brown's making $30. So that's $50 million. But still, you see that ship is starting to sail right now as we speak for the Philadelphia Eagles. So that's just uncomfortable for a conversation for the Cowboys to have. And why it's another reason why you shouldn't be sure about it, just because of the personality. We've seen multiple games this year, whether it be in that game against the Detroit Lions, and there were multiple other games where he just checks out. And you cannot have that in any way, form, or fashion in a player. Now, give him credit. He balled out when CeeDee Lamb was injured earlier on in the season. Got to give him credit where credit's due. George Pickens balled out. But to me, from the beginning, this felt like a one-year rental. Brian Schottenheimer talked about it on Up and Adam's show. They were targeting Tetairoa McMillan. And I would say they probably hate themselves that they could not draft that player. They're probably hitting themselves on the foot. Like, darn it, we could have got that player. Had him for 4 years alongside for CeeDee Lamb for cheap. So in a time of desperation in Jerry Jones, you make a trade for a player like George Pickens. And when he had the performance that he had this year, made his first All-Pro, and done the things he's done along with that, with the stuff where him and CeeDee Lamb was out playing poker and didn't make curfew, Brady in Vegas on Monday Night Football, to the stuff that happened against the Detroit Lions where he just absolutely checked out once CeeDee Lamb got hurt. So they put themselves in a very, very tough situation. But they've done that and alleviated that issue to a certain degree by placing the non-exclusive franchise tag on George Pickens to where they're able to get some sort of compensation for him. And I've said multiple times, I am with George Pickens being on the Cowboys for less than $28 million. T. Higgins got $28 million as a number 2 wide receiver. There's no way I'm paying George Pickens over $30 million. It is not happening. I don't think any team should pay him. Any good franchise is not paying this guy $30+ million. It is not happening. There's no way you can invest that type of money into that type of player. There's just no way. And I'm going to leave that pretty much at that. Hope you all enjoyed. Had a good time. Hour-long show. Pretty much too long for me. I got in a rant early on Jalen Hurts. But hope you all enjoyed. We'll talk about Puka Nakua and everything else in the next episode of the show. More than likely will be next weekend. But like, subscribe, share the podcast to a friend or family member. And I love you all so much. Have a good weekend. Enjoy Easter with friends and family. And I love you all so much, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.